Hey there! So, chances are, if you watch my channel, there is a likelihood that you got into it through my Danganronpa retrospectives that I did a couple of years ago. And if you follow Danganronpa stuff, then you might be familiar with a particularly popular fan game called Project Eden's Garden, which is ramping up to release their first chapter proper this December 20th. So I conducted a little interview with the devs last time when they released their prologue, and now I'm back to do it again with the release of Chapter 1. We had a pretty fun discussion, so I wanted to put it out there for you guys to get you excited for Chapter 1's release, and hopefully this gives you some cool insight into the process of how it was made. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So yeah, let's get right into these saucy questions.
Yay!
Since the release of the prologue, how has the development pipeline and creative process changed?
So there actually has been some things that change on certain departments. So for example, for the prologue, we mainly based it off Danganronpa gameplay. However, in Chapter 1, there are certain mini-games that appear that are not actually part of the Danganronpa formula. I can't elaborate too much on what those are. At the same time, I can talk about one of them because it has been shown in the trailer, which is the pachinko machine and the Peggle that you saw. So all these new mini games that you will see in Chapter 1 has taken some time from us to actually do in terms of game design. Sweden will probably kill me for this, but doing game design is pretty difficult, and I've been killed many times because of it. That's the one thing that we had to do in Chapter 1 that we didn't have to do much in Prologue. Now, the other thing that has changed is that in 3D modeling, because in the Prologue we realized that 3D modeling is probably one of the things that took the most time. Mainly because we didn't really have much concepts to base it off at first, which kind of blocked our way in terms of developing the models. So what we did was, our solution is that we developed a quick way to concept. So what this means is that we would go online and we would search up types of furniture we want in the room. So actually most of this is done by me. Most of the concept art looks really funny. They are mostly just real life images of just IRL, stock images plastered into a room, and then we sort of just look at how it looks like overall together cohesively. And then on one side, we just establish, oh yeah, this is the mood of the room, / this is the aesthetic. We mostly look at color palettes as well, purpose of the room and whatnot, and we just draft it out as soon as possible within usually 1-2 days. We don't take that long on it, / if it does take a period of time, it most likely is constructive feedback from the writers or any special requests in the room that needs to be fulfilled. So that's one thing we've changed, which really speed up the 3D modeling process. So that's one thing we can say we're proud of for this chapter.
Well, for writing, it's kind of the opposite. The pipeline for how writing went is really not changed that much from the prologue, because the way we wrote the prologue, it worked. So we're just kind of sticking to that method of doing things. And I imagine we will for the foreseeable future, unless for whatever reason we need to kind of alter it a bit. But from the writing side of things, it's been pretty consistent.
From the development and programming side, not much has really changed. A lot of the stuff done in the engine is mostly just editing that Sozi and I just go in and do.
Obviously, the process this time has been a little longer. I guess that is a change, I would say. I don't think it's not a negative change, because it's inevitable that the development process will be longer for a much larger chapter. This is just kind of, we had the prologue and that was quick enough, quick in quotation marks. And chapter 1, this is kind of our first taste of tackling something really big in scale.
So if you have noticed, I think in one of the devlogs, I did mention that there was straight up visual improvement, because we managed to find out a problem with the shadows that was happening in the prologue that bothered the heck out of me. I hope... Am I allowed to swear in this?
Yeah.
Yeah, it bothered the out of me, because sometimes whenever the camera would zoom in really close to an object, the shadows would go crazy, really, really dark. And we did not know how to solve that until during the chapter 1 development, where we were like, oh, it was just a button, or actually 2 buttons, I think. I'm not exactly sure, but I know I watched Sweden changed it. That alone like has changed our pipeline a little bit because it made 3D modeling much more flexible. Last time when we did 3D modeling, our requirements were very strict by me because I didn't want Unity to explode while trying to do real-time rendering. So many of the triangle counts in the prologue models are much lower, as you can tell. Like, for example, if you actually compare the old hallway to the current dorm hallway, it's like an insane difference, right? It's because the old one has like, it's just very restricted in terms of triangle count. But as time went on, I kind of learned that from what I heard from Sweden, most of the things that's taking up most of the game space is actually the 2D assets, which we do need to take time to scale down at some point.
That whole thing Taka said about how at the end of the day it was kind of just pressing a button or two, that tends to be the answer for a lot of things. The process of realizing that can sometimes be a struggle.
I think that was a combination of the light baking and we had an option, a certain option on our rendering pipeline turned like way too far up. We had no idea. Yeah, we had no idea how that had happened, but after we had turned it down, everything started looking like so much better.
Has development of Chapter 1 felt easier or more difficult than development for the prologue, and what unique challenges have cropped up during this part of development?
I certainly have the answer of all time. So for my side of things, it was both easier and more difficult for multiple reasons. The first is that there was a lot less to playtest, and also a lot more to playtest. So all the things we had to bug test for the prologue, like the menus and the walking around it and investigating and the non-stop debate, we didn't have to worry about that this time. But obviously, that's not to say we didn't playtest the investigation at NSDs. Of course we did. Right. But we could at least playtest those with the knowledge that the NSDs weren't going to explode mid-game or something. As for all the new stuff we had to play test, obviously I can't really talk about it, but there's a lot, and it is very time-consuming. And this time, for the prologue, I was kind of like the main person playtesting. This time, we've amassed a team of playtesters. They've been so monumental in helping identify all the bugs and everything in the game, all the errors, and fixing them. And then there's stuff, the things that are more centralized to my specific role as creative director. One thing that I found really difficult this chapter was the non-stop debates, because we already had non-stop debates in the mock trial. So I wanted the non-stop debates in chapter 1 to go a step further. For context, I'm the one who animates all the text flying around during non-stop debates. I decide the size of the text, if it's going to be straight or diagonal, what direction is going to fly, if it's going to spin around, and then I animate them in the Unity engine. And thank you, Sweden, for teaching me how to do that. I also put all the camera angles in. I plug in all the camera angles, and I made those back with Sweden back during prologue development. That's another thing we didn't have to worry about, creating camera angles. We already had a batch of them to pick from thanks to the prologue. Having to animate those new non-stop debates was extremely time consuming. I spent months on them. The prologue mock trial had about 5 non-stop debates, just going off memory. Chapter 1 has 11. I tried my best to give every non-stop debate a theme, a natural progression. I had Taco comb through them and give feedback. And of course, I had to do similar animations for another mini game that is revealed in the trailer, but I won't say anything. Obviously, that took a lot of time. The whole general process of hopping into the Unity engine and taking the voice lines and sound effects and music and all the assets that the team makes and manually plugging all those features into the game is also very time consuming. Over the last few months, I've done that thousands of times. I've assigned thousands of voice lines to their respective dialogues. It's a similar case for general character voiceovers. Those are the random sounds a character will make when the player speaks to them during daily and deadly life. For example, you might talk to Tashika and she'll say, my, or whatever. That's a character voiceover. In order to make that possible, I comb through the script and I assign specific voiceovers to specific dialogues. And this isn't unique to Chapter 1, I did it in the prologue as well. It was just a lot more extensive this time around. It is very rewarding work though, because like when you have all the voiceovers plugged into the script, it really helps build the game's atmosphere. And obviously a big part of that is just because of how well the VAs perform those lines, and also Justin and Bowen, they are sound producers. They also like remaster them, refine them, and they're the ones who actually like add it into the engine so I can then like pluck them out of their little archive and actually plug them into the game. Writing is always going to be a very time-consuming thing. The trial took us a long time to write, but I would definitely say for my, like, as creative director, like, from my personal experience, the process of plugging everything into engine was more time-consuming than writing. But I love it. That's why I do it. So...
Okay, so for me, it has been both as well, but I'd say overall it has been more difficult because of a lot of crazy things that happened. So, Salsa did bring up how crazy, like, there's a crazy amount of shit that happened during the development of Chapter 1.
Especially to you. I wanted you to tell all of that.
Essentially, one of the biggest things that happened was that I went overseas for overseas program, correct?
Okay.
To study in Seattle. However, somehow, there was a funny thing called an electric scooter that I fell off of in an awkward way, and then my ankle got obliterated.
Oh.
So, that lesson taught me, number one, to never trust my friends in terms of what they say about my pain, because I thought it was sprained, because they all were saying, oh yeah, you know, it's probably sprained. I looked down, there's like blue, black, and some random colors look like all over, and I'm like, guys, I don't think that's correct. And my pain tolerance is really high, as you can tell. I'm developing, you know, a fangin. But like, that is one of the bigger things. And there is a literal picture of me doing work on a laptop right before like going to surgery. So it's kind of insane how much the project has increased in terms of exposure. So as the director who overlooks the marketing as well, I have to basically check the health of our fandom sometimes, you know? So for example, I have to release promotional posters here and there. We can't be silent for too long. We need a devlog here and there, you know? We kind of plan these things as they go. However, sometimes we do have, for me at least, I do have targets for each month. The biggest thing in Chapter 1 is the execution, actually one of the bigger things. And I'm mainly in charge of that. Well, Panic does help me a lot with the 3D space as well as the modeling. Oh, thank God for Panic. We have to do 2D animations in the 3D space. So we're doing it as faithful as Danganronpa execution. So I'm not gonna, you know, hype it up too much, haha, you know, tucks hair behind my ear. But it is looking very nice. And I hope you guys are looking forward to that. But there is a total of more than 20 animated sprites in this entire execution. And it is twice as long as a Danganronpa execution.
Oh.
Now, I won't tell you why it's twice as long. It just happened to be that way because it was very heavily inspired by a scene from somewhere. To hype it up a little more, we went through 3 drafts of execution. Meaning that the first idea was rejected, second one was rejected, and then the third one was the sweet spot, which I was the one who storyboarded everything, so yeah. The reason for the rejections of the first 2 execution was that I believe it was not torturous enough.
Oh, okay, I see. It has to be worse.
And so
Because that's the thing about, you know, execution animations in the Danganronpa games, I guess, is like, you know, obviously it is very brutal, but it also has to, like, evoke a specific, you know, a feeling. It always has sort of a relevance to the character. It always has something that twists the knife just that little bit more because it is personalized in some way, and I think nailing that can be definitely a creative challenge, so I'm looking forward to seeing how that pans out.
every copy of Execution is personalized. That's my theory. We also have to make nice cinematics. Like I said earlier, we do have a lot of promotional material that we have to prepare for the public, correct? And some of them do include teasers, you know, like the last teaser you saw, mainly to give you guys, hey, here's an eyeful. And then let us develop for like a month, okay? Please don't bother us. Yeah.
Just so you know that we're not dead.
Have to handle that.
Here's a little shred of food and back to the cave.
Other things, I guess just quickly mention before I end off this question, other things that have been a little more difficult is that maybe storyboarding. Saucy did mention all the NSD animations. Recently, there was one specific minigame that needed some specific storyboarding, and the answer is that as time goes on, we do develop solutions. So, for example, the recent minigame has pretty difficult to map out animations, mainly because of its game mechanics. So, to work hand in hand with the game mechanics, because in NSD, it's easy, right? Because all you have to say is, oh yeah, just let the text go from left to right in a specific amount of time in some kind of animation. That's it. However, this one requires actual, you have to look at the positions of the text, you know? I think you know which minigame I'm talking about, but
right.
yeah, there are restrictions to it. So, recently I started helping Sazi storyboard certain things, and it really helped the process a lot for the NSD, and apparently it speed things up, so I probably will be doing that in the future.
Yeah, I'm actually going to be elaborating upon that a little later, yeah.
I think Taco and Soze have pretty much covered it from the programming side. Anything that we had already done previously in the prologue, I didn't really have much of any issue with moving forward. I try to make all my code to be reusable so that we're able to just go get it done and I don't have to spend any time doing it. As for unique challenges, some of the staffs as well as my own, our health has not been good these past 2 years or so compared to during the time of the prologue, so I think that's been a big challenge.
Physical and mental health always comes first.
Absolutely.
As is inevitable with the passing of time, there will be things that happen in real life that may be upsetting, that may need our attention, and we try to be really understanding of that. And if someone's going through something, we're like, okay, you know what? You don't need to do any work. Please just look after yourself first.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think that's part of why even just 2-3 years later, we're still going at it strong. It's because there's no crunch culture.
Yeah.
We try to facilitate a really chill environment, you're just hanging out with a bunch of friends, and there's no pressure to get something out by the end of the week.
Typically, in a Danganronpa game, the prologue serves as more of a hook for what's to come, while Chapter 1 really starts to unveil what the rest of the game will be like. Was writing for this chapter more or less challenging now that the main story is underway?
I will say that, and I mentioned this a little later, so I may be repeating myself later, but the writers have been really excited for Chapter 1. We've had a very clear outlook for how we want this chapter to go, so writing it wasn't especially difficult, so to speak, because we had such a vivid outline for what we wanted. I would say the challenges are that it's much longer. There's also, when you start to get into the meat in the story, you have to always be aware, how will this affect future events? How does this, does this contradict anything in, a previous chapter? That's always something you gotta be aware of. But I think we're generally, pretty good with, pointing out things that don't make sense, because we've got a pretty solid idea of how we want the plot to go. Actual structuring of the chapters, that's never really been the most difficult part.
For Chapter 1 specifically, I think certain things did change somewhat, but it mainly remained in the details. So I wouldn't exactly specify what I'm talking about, but I'd say that some motivations have been changed a little, or basically added with more depth. There's this funny thing that I always tell Saze, I'm kind of the logistics person. So when I look at the script, I would read it and say, oh, this character would have fucking do that. Oh, this doesn't make sense.
This doesn't make sense here.
Right. There was something about the murder case about Chapter 1 where we had to spend 3 days arguing about it because...
yeah.
Because I pointed out a logic that did not work at all, and it implied something that was hilarious. So I was like, guys, this does not work, and it took 3 days to explain it to the team, mainly because number one, questions left and right, I don't blame them at all, because it was a very specific problem. Because I remember I was at school, right? I was listening to a class, and I saw that message, hey, this is how chapter 1 murder is gonna go. I looked at it and I was like, that does not make sense. And I had to draw an entire diagram, an explanation and whatnot, and chart it out to tell them, this doesn't work on a piece of tissue paper with a pen. Because I didn't have any paper. There are some interesting things that happen in development, which is, I'll still never let down, and I think it's hilarious. But, in a fun way. Certain things definitely changed because, it's either not, number one, in the draft itself, it isn't really elaborated on too much, which I don't blame them, because once things are in engine, that's where you really see the case for what it is, correct? Mm-hmm. I'd say that's what really changed in terms of the writing, like, if you were talking about, like, major changes.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, personally, I love when Taco comes to and is like, this doesn't make sense, because when you're writing something, it doesn't matter how long you write or like how good a writer you consider yourself, there's always going to be one thing you overlook, one thing you write that's kind of stupid. Mm-hmm. And so it's really refreshing to have like someone like Taco come in and be like, Sozi, what's all this about? And I'll be like, oh, yeah, I was, I don't know what I was thinking with that.
I was going through it at the time.
I was going through it, yeah.
I think Sozi has, like, an insane emotional intelligence that I would never have. Writing those, like, really emotional scenes, I'm like, aw. But then when it comes to, like, the logistics, I'll be like, how the f does this even work? Math and science person versus, like, maybe literature person, I don't know.
Speaking of getting more into the meat of the game, Chapter 1 is also where a lot of other game elements, free time, mini-games, etc., typically begin to open up. How has tackling that been from the programming side of things? Are there any particular aspects of the game design that have been more difficult than others?
Tackling these things have gone about as smoothly as I had originally expected. Even during the prologue, I had done a significant amount of planning for the mechanics that would end up being in Chapter 1, and because of that, it has made my experience with developing it a lot smoother. But as for difficulties, I've noticed that there's like a lot of unique edge cases and situations of the game that required a lot more time and attention to properly address them. I can't really go into many details on that since they're specific to topics on Chapter 1. For a majority, at least from my programming side, the biggest difficulty would have probably been looking more into architecture, optimization and stuff, and just stuff like that.
You said that, like, are there any aspects of the game design that has been more difficult than the others, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, one of the trial mini games. Other than that, yeah, that's all I have to say. When you're making an original game design, it's one of the most painful things ever, because when you write that game design document, you can't really exactly visualize it unless you have like a full-on reference. Mm-hmm. We did have a reference, thankfully, but still did not make my life easier. Thankfully, when we did that prototype, Paddock actually did the prototype of the minigame in another port of the game, like in a separate port. So he is more of a visual programmer, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And that did help. Although I'm not sure if like, because the way Paddock programs is different from Sweden, and integration might have been hell for him, so only Sweden can say that, yeah.
It actually was a bit shorter than I had expected. I think the biggest struggle, like, going in between that was probably specific edge cases, and I think it was those that really, for the specific trial minigame that Taco is referencing, that it's those unique edge cases that really took up most of that time for that minigame.
I would definitely have to imagine, especially for original minigames, I know you can't get too into it, obviously, but, like, it's one thing, I guess, to even, like, try to replicate or iterate upon a sort of, like, minigame concept that is already familiar to the source material. I would venture to imagine that it's another thing entirely to try to make something a little bit more unique, and then have kind of a moment of being like, oh, well, maybe this is why some of these mini games in the actual Danganronpa games are unpopular, because they're very difficult to work on.
Oh, right, exactly. That's why we look at the Danganronpa mini games and we go, which one do we not like? And we would not include that because, Hangman's Gambit, but let's not talk about that part. It's just a process of okay, because the one thing about game design you have to remember is that it has to also derive from the game itself. Mm-hmm. So for example, the game has taught you how to play non-stop debate, correct? Like shooty bang bang,
right.
Like with controls. And if you suddenly, for example, add a fishing mini game into the middle of the trial, that would not make too much sense, unless maybe that fishing has shooty bang bang elements,
I would,
maybe you shoot the
like
fish?
To fish in the middle of the trial, so I don't know what you're talking about.
That'd be hilarious. Mainly we have to think about the overall gameplay as well. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's all I have to add.
Creative projects are always subject to change, especially during multi-year development cycles. Are there any aspects of the story or game itself that have evolved beyond where they were, even in the prologue? No spoilers, of course.
Well, I'll talk strictly from a story standpoint. In terms of story, it depends. If we're comparing the story as it currently is to its first draft, then yes, the current story is absolutely nothing like the first draft. But in the time between the prologue's release and Chapter 1's release, the direction of the story hasn't really changed or anything. At most, we've maybe tweaked a few things and just been fleshing out future plot lines.
And that was definitely kind of the curiosity that I had. Even the minutia can sort of jumble around between stages of a project. So.
Mm-hmm. Naturally, yeah.
Some things that have changed from like the original prologue were similar to what I had mentioned earlier, is those specific edge cases. There are some details from the original Danganronpa series that we had, we have used as a base plate, and we have then evolved over time. I guess an example of this, like just from the prologue itself, would be the pathos mechanic, where we take something that is, the original non-stop debate mechanic of Danganronpa, and with the pathos mechanic, we turn it into, something kind of original or our own spin or take on it. And I think that we'll have a couple of those instances in Chapter 1.
Speaking of multi-year development cycles, sticking with a game for this long can no doubt be a challenge in and of itself. How has the team kept its passion for the project going? And what would be your advice to aspiring developers who may have concerns about retaining their energy for something they want to make?
First, I'll speak about it first from like a personal point of view. I have ADHD. I have pretty bad motivation issues. So the fact that I've consistently been working on Project Eden's Garden for 4 years at this point is pretty, or almost 4 years, is pretty remarkable. And for me, at least, I think the reason why I've been able to maintain this motivation, this focus is for a number of reasons. One, because the people on this project are my friends. I enjoy talking to them. When I voice chat with them, we can work together, we can talk about things together, media we like together. Every voice chat is fun in its own way. So it never feels like some classic work environment, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And earlier, that's why I said it was very chill, because it feels more like a group of friends just coming together to make something. So that's a big thing as well, just the general energy of the team, that we are a group of friends before we are co-workers. And the second is seeing fan reactions to the game. For me, that's always been a huge motivator, because, I see people talk about the game, I see them do fan art, and it makes me excited, because I'm like, I cannot wait for them to see what happens in the next chapter. Mm-hmm. That always drives me to work, because, even if I'm not feeling motivated, I think about our fans and, the love they have for the project, and I'm like, nah, I gotta do this. I want to give these people, more of this game. So I guess a recommendation I would have is, if you have a really long project like this one, you should definitely try to facilitate an environment that's cozy, that's kind of safe, and that's just very friendly, and that's also forgiving. because, as I also mentioned earlier, we try to be really considerate of people's physical and mental health. That kind of adds a layer of comfort that makes the team so enjoyable, because we know that if something happens, if we get physically hurt or something like that, we can just be like, hey, look everyone, I'm hurt, we might have to delay this a little, and everyone's just going to be like, that's okay, look after yourself first.
I don't actually have much of an issue or like problem keeping my passion, mainly because what I see myself doing is something more interesting than just, oh yeah, I lie in bed, I use phone in hand, I laugh at the funny meme. To me at least, Peg is kind of a replacement for that, right? I could be in bed laughing at random stuff, but I could also be, working on something really cool, that would benefit me in the far future. Yeah, that's how I would see it. And yeah, I do agree with Saze. My friends are also tied to this, and so actually, funny story. It's a well-known fact that I'm not the original director of this project, correct? But I think the reason why I managed to get to the position I was, in no less than a year actually, was mainly because I was actually making friendships while I was still a 2D artist. So I was going around the team basically talking to literally anyone I can see, because I was just a bright-eyed 19-year-old who had nothing really better to do. And plus, I honestly, before Peg, I was going through like a really big depression in my life, because I just some major stuff did happen, and I was thinking like, oh, maybe making some friends would help. What does this sound like the plot of MLP? But like, yeah, no, making friends did like make me just like treasure this project a lot, because I don't think I'll be here if like my friends aren't there, I'll probably be just at home laughing at memes again. Peg is like a yellow brick road to me, because it's a very long road, right? The yellow brick road is just like a very long road to home, At the end of it, it's like the reward is there. But on the way there, it's like an entire journey, correct? And yeah, they always say the journey matters, and what really matters is the friends you make along the way. Yay, I finally could say that quote. But yeah, I think Peg is a very slow burn, but at the end of it, no matter what the result is, at least we did it,
Yeah.
We did a lot of things with this project, yeah. That's mainly how I retain my passion. In terms of advice, I'd say that, as a director, be involved. You are a manager, but also a team player at the same time. Because one thing I do see that some fangame projects like do suffer with, or actually some fan games in general, correct? Or just teams I've been in, is that directors sometimes just like are just, okay, do this, do that, I'm going offline, bye. You know what I'm saying? Like, you have to understand and work around what your team members ask for, because you're working with someone, you're not working with a robot. A robot does instructions, full stop, correct? But a person has feelings, has obligations, they're taking time out of their way to, do this fan project. At least make their life a little easier, even if it makes your life a little harder, if that makes sense. Yeah. You have to shoulder the weight together with the team, even if being a director is a lot of work, but you still have to do it. I do many things such as 2D, 3D, direction work, marketing, writing as well in some aspects, and all these things all combined, right? So you're like, the main point is that how I involve myself with it is that I involve myself in the process itself. However, if you can't do any of that, that's totally okay, right? I've seen incredible directors still excel without knowing what to do, correct? What they do is they actually, provide the support and like just listen to their teammates. So my advice is, number one, communicate with your team. And how that relates to, I guess, like having your passion kept for this project is that when you have good team morale, it does retain your energy. It helps. It actually adds on to the energy, It's also related to establishing a team environment. And the thing is that our team environment is mainly very, like Saze said, chill. However, there's also one important aspect, which is that we are direct. That's the difference, yeah. And conflicts do happen in teams, and that's one thing that I've seen that happens in fangame projects. However, the one thing about conflicts is that you either address it now, or it will slowly build up over time.
Right.
So
Definitely.
just talk to your teammates. Yeah, that's like my biggest advice for any aspiring devs. And another thing to add to is reach for the stars. However, at least have an end goal in mind. Like, think about what like your future is, right? Like how you see yourself with a certain project in the future. You know, when you're in your 20s, you have to be a little bit delusional. If you're not a little bit delusional, you wouldn't do anything. Trust me. Like, I've seen all my 20-year-old friends. They all default to, you know, I'm just gonna go to a game studio and work for the rest of my life, 9 to 5. And I mean, good for them, you know. Honestly, great for them that they can take that life. I can't do that shit, dude. I'll be pissed, yeah, if I do that for the rest of my life.
A lot of us have jobs, and so we balance working on PEG with those jobs. And I think if you're able to strike a good balance like that, it is a lot easier to like work and get work finished, because we've been able to incorporate it into our lives in a way where we can still focus on our jobs, focus, you know, on other real life responsibilities, and still contribute to the game.
And who knows, maybe next time our team would have a studio together. Wink, wink. Totally not foreshadowing.
For me, once Chapter 1 is released, I intend to publish like all of the newer code to be open source or a part of DR Editor.
Okay.
And my motivation comes from helping out the community. So with Eden's Garden, I'm able to hone my skills as much as I can, and at the same time be able to provide for the community in the future.
Hell yeah. Have there been any aspects of the game that during Chapter 1's development had to be cut or cut down on for one reason or another?
Yep. Yeah,
Yep.
we cut a lot of stuff. A lot of the times, we always try to make stuff as best as we possibly can, but there are always, you know, aspects that we can't really account for, and we end up having to scrap a couple of ideas here or there. That we think would be great, but weren't, most of them I think amounted to we either didn't have enough time, or we didn't have like enough resources, or I guess in combination with time, it was just whatever it was not worth the time and effort, given, you know, we're aiming for, you know, the end of the year, etc., right?
Right.
That isn't to say that most of the ideas that we have aren't completely scrapped per se. It's more of just benched because we know that later on, you know, say we hit, you know, post Chapter 6, right? There's nothing saying that we can't go back and, you know, doll up the rest of the entire game and, you know, just like for ourselves, right? Really just make, you know, the aspects of it that we, you know, I wish we did this, we had done this, etc., right? We can just go back and do it.
Definitely.
Maybe there will be a fishing minigame.
Yeah, right, we'll finally
you.
add the fishing minigame. Speaking as a voice actor, I know that spending a lot of time with a role lets you familiarize yourself with it even more. How would you say the cast has settled into their characters at this point? Has recording dialogue for Chapter 1 been a bit breezier as a result?
To be honest, I think the cast settled into their characters ages ago. We have like an inside joke in the team. I might have even said this in the last interview, but we have an inside joke in the team that the voice actors are basically their characters. I feel like everyone's already come to understand their characters really well. And as for recording dialogue, it's always been really, really easy to work with the voice actors. They're mostly in the dark about the game's events, so they're always extremely excited to be given new lines. And this is why I say they're so easy to work with, because their commitment is just amazing. The Chapter 1 trial, it has nearly 3,000 lines, most of which are spoken, and the VAs put their all into every single one of their lines. So I hope they get shown a lot of love for their performances in Chapter 1, because they all deserve it. And I want to shout out Starlight, the VO lead, because he played a huge role in listening to all these voice lines, choosing the takes. He would even go into like Audacity and like crop a lot of them and send them off to like the sound producers, Justin and Bowen. As did, you know, like other voice actors, they would also be happy to crop their own audio. He works so well with the voice actors, and like I'm so grateful for him, because he is like taking on a huge amount of work when it comes to these voice lines, obviously, but he meshes with the voice actors so naturally that he's basically just a blessing in disguise. For voice lines and everything, that's always been, well, easy breezy process, which I think was extremely fortunate. We're so lucky to have these VAs. We're so lucky.
I remember playing the prologue and thinking everybody completely knocked it out of the park, so I'm just like, you know, just knowing that like they have even more of that time under their belt to have spent with these characters, I'm just very excited to hear everybody's performances again.
These voice actors are literally their characters. I cannot say it otherwise. Maybe, okay, maybe some of the characters might be a little more mentally ill in, Eden's Garden itself, but otherwise, like, if you know, maybe like some of the voice actors might be a little bit more crazy as well. I'm not sure.
Kalito is just Damon, but if Damon was nice, Kalito is
Yeah,
Damon's voice actor. Yeah.
You know, I value that as a qualifier for him. Again, no spoilers, but once the prologue is over in any Danganronpa game, we know that the killing phase is underway. The prologue featured a sort of mock trial, while I assume Chapter 1 will obviously hone in on an incident that happens between the present cast. How was it to really dig into the meat of writing a murder mystery? What challenges arose during the process of trying to figure it all out and make it satisfying?
Like I said earlier, writers were very, very excited to start Chapter 1. We've had the overarching premise of the mystery in our head since 2021. So when Chapter 1 development began, it was more about, like Taka said, fine-tuning the little details to ultimately create what we hope is an engaging mystery and an engaging trial. And the thing that I kind of love about writing for this game is that it's not just the writers. Anyone can contribute. You know, we've had Hayden, who's one of our musicians. He can be so involved. He will give feedback and offer suggestions. I love it because it shows that, yeah, this person may not be a writer, they may not be the one writing the script, but they can still have great ideas. And those ideas are still extremely, valuable to us. You have to balance everything. Pacing, mood, mystery, how many hints you should give the audience, how many hints you shouldn't give the audience. Every time you write a sentence, you have to try and gauge what the player might be thinking when they reach that sentence in-game, because you want to try and keep the player and the game on the same wavelength. And obviously, and sometimes you want the game to maybe be a little ahead of the player. For when you want them to be on the same wavelength, you really gotta sit down and piece together realistically what is the player thinking at this moment. Personally, I like to write trials as if I'm the player actually trying to solve it. So instead of laying everything out all at once, I try to chip at the mystery piece by piece. It's very hard, and it really makes you respect Danganronpa's writers and how well they do class trials. But we do really love how this trial turned out. It is something that we have put our heart and souls into. It's a very big trial, and it sets up some major arcs that you're going to see develop throughout the rest of the game. We hope it's satisfying. We know that the playtesters enjoyed it a lot, but what the rest of the fanbase thinks, well, we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, especially in a format like this, which can be extremely difficult to write for. Like you said, it definitely makes you appreciate more the sort of writing work that went into the original games, where it's juggling all of these moving parts from a surface level. You know, it can be kind of easy to critique some of these elements, but when you're actually in the driver's seat, sort of trying to work that out for yourself, it's oh yeah, that's really complicated.
Peg is not my first time writing trials. I've written trials before, for a little AU that, a little My Hero AU that I'm still working on. I've had to put it on hiatus because of Peg, but that AU, I think I might have mentioned it last interview. It's where My Hero used to...
I do remember it. And I like it quite a bit. So.
I had to write some new trials for it. That was my first time digging into trials, and in the process of doing so, it made me realize, oh, so that's why they did that in the Danganronpa games. That's why they made that decision, or that's why they did this thing. Because when you're actually writing it, it's oh yeah, okay, I get it now.
Mainly we ask ourselves certain questions. Number one, I did say this earlier, would the character think of this? Would it be realistic? So, the one thing you might have noticed about Peg is that I wouldn't say that, like, one is better than the other at all. In fact, like, I 100% respect how Danganronpa is written, because obviously, how certain murders are carried out, right? They're not really related to their personality or whatever. They're just more so like, it makes them a very interesting case. And in SDR2, when they have the despair disease, obviously that's not something that would happen in real life, right?
Right.
But for Peg, we focus on what is logically, I guess, like the real world, So I guess like that would be like the difference between Danganronpa and like Peg writing in terms of writing the case. Now, obviously, I do not know anything about how the writers, which I respect so highly of, in Danganronpa write, like, their trials and whatnot, right? But how we really do it is that, obviously, at the end of it, we think, okay, who dies? Who kills? You know what I'm saying? Like that. And then after that, from there, we look at, like, I guess, we think about the locations in the school, and, like, what events would lead up to that? Why would they kill? All these reasons, right?
Kinda
you have to think about that, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of having like a sort of idea of a premise of kind of like what you want to arrive at, and then sort of working backwards from there to extrapolate upon that.
Correct, yes. When it comes to considering what the character would do, like their motives and whatnot, it gets a little complicated, right? However, well, at the end of it, will it be like realistic for this character to die? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. You can't really force like characters to kill each other. Oh yeah, because it's interesting for this character A to die instead of character B. No, like that's not how it works in Peg, right? It's more so that does it make sense that this character would go off their way to stabby, shoot, bang, whatever, do whatever, right? I'm not sure how like they're gonna get killed, but they're gonna get killed in some way, correct? So yeah, those are the things to definitely consider when writing. And like Saze said, I really agree. Non-writers can have insane ideas. Well, I do consider myself a writer in some aspects, correct? I never really, I'm not really as crazy or like as very well, into writing as much as obviously the writing department and the people in there. But I remember when me and Saze just sat down and we were thinking about this one like really big thing on the story that we had an issue with, and then I just went on a tangent for like half an hour or so, or like 10 minutes, and just spilled all my ideas, and Sose was like, wait, that cooks. And then we just developed on it, yeah. So sometimes ideas can come from the most random places, and like I said, just like non-writers, non-artists, non-musicians, anyone, right? Sometimes when you're an expert on a certain field, you would think about the technical aspects a little too much, correct? Like, should I include this metaphor here? For artists, it's like, should I make this line work thicker? Should I make it, like, thinner? But at the end of it, you have to realize what kind of people are looking at your work are audiences. Most of them are probably not writers, not artists, so they will only see that 10%. However, that doesn't mean that your 90% shouldn't be good, right? It has to be good, because it sets the foundation for that 10%, But with that said, the non-artists can see that 10% very clearly, if that makes sense. Like, they are so honed in on that. While as a writer, you do see the whole thing, correct? So, yeah. Definitely the devils are in the details, but non-writers can help a lot. So I guess like that's another advice for anyone that like seriously sometimes ideas can come out of the strangest places ever.
There are some plot points in Peg that came about as like a joke, and then we were all like, wait.
Maybe that's
maybe unless
sometimes when it comes to character writing, the most difficult part of it for me is handling their emotional scenes. Like I said, I'm not as emotionally intelligent as Saze is, because at the start, when I was just an artist, correct? Like not involved in any of the writing and whatnot, I didn't get the characters, and I did not understand for the longest time, right? Because obviously I was just an artist, I didn't think much further than that, correct? But over time, it honestly got easier. So it's like, with time, when you get, it's kind of like the same way with people, right? Over time, as you get to know them, you get the feel for them, and you're like, okay, so this character, this person would do this person wouldn't do this, right? It's that's how we treat our characters, just like people. You know, like real people that have real problems. Yeah. So, over time for me, it has gotten much easier, but it would be a lie to say I was confident about it at first.
And to your earlier point,
So-
I think that makes more sense as to why you're like, well, I can't just force the story to go in this direction because I think it would be cool. Like, if you do understand your characters like that and really kind of have a grasp on their personalities, you understand more too that it's like, well, you know, I can't force these circumstances to happen unnaturally if it wouldn't be true to the character.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. If the character has like a certain conflict and whatever, you gotta take that into account, right? You can't just like, oh, they would do this because, oh yeah, you know, it will progress the story a lot. No, we shouldn't do that. Yeah.
No.
Especially for a game that is about a killing game, and it's a death game with like, you're trapped with 16 people, 15 other people, and you're just all, oh, obviously like the part about it that is scary is their emotions, you know? Things that would
Yes.
drive them to kill. Yeah, exactly. So you have to focus on that, yeah. The biggest demon that we do focus on the most, right? Because, you know, in Danganronpa, you know, obviously they do have this overarching, like, story, correct? Like, sometimes characters would do things for the greater good. Not to say in Peg there aren't characters like that, correct? However, like, I'd say, like, realistically, when you're trapped with 15 other people, right? The most dangerous thing is the other people, you know? So we like to focus on that, yeah, mainly.
What are your hopes for development going forward from here?
Well, I'm hoping some processes can be a bit more streamlined, like the non-stop debate animations, for example. This was our first time tackling a legitimate trial, so while the mock trial gave us some expectations, we still weren't really prepared for how big this thing was going to be. On the bright side, the experience helped me better understand my limits and better respect my limits in the sense that I know not to overwork myself. That's where, and Taco really helped there because they mentioned it a few questions back, but for some like context, for the NSDs, I'd been doing my own quote-unquote storyboarding, and I say quote-unquote because really I was just figuring out things as I went. I have a bad habit of doing that, and I was doing that for a few months while, you know, everyone else worked in their respective tasks. But eventually I developed like artist block, and Taka noticed this, that I was stressing out over this artist block. So they were like, I'll storyboard some of these animations for you. And that was a huge help because I can follow Taco's instructions and just get straight to animating. And the experience made me realize that, you know, I do not need to overwork myself. The team environment is extremely chill. There's no expectation that you need to rush things out. And if I need help with doing something, I can just ask. And another thing the experience taught me is to use storyboards, because even though creating them might take a bit of time, it's very worth it when it comes to streamlining the process. So from a personal point of view, that's definitely my hopes that I can, you know, that we can continue finding ways to streamline the process.
Personally, number one, obviously get a little faster and find easier ways to do things instead of spending like 50 years on one thing, you know? Because like as much as we want to express ourselves as much as possible, there is a deadline. So like, yeah. The one thing I definitely did learn about chapter 1 is that, oh my god, scope does matter, because honestly we kind of overreached a little with this chapter in my opinion. Because like, oh my goodness, like, so first of all, FTEs. That
Oh my
crazy trial. That trial was so long, like, but it's good, it's good. It's just that, you know, I didn't expect it to be that long, if that makes sense, yeah. So,
Yeah.
definitely for chapter 2, we're establishing a scope. And I remember when Sweden was telling me no more than this many 3D models, and I was like, okay, sir.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 We've had
Yeah.
to lay
So-
ground rules.
So honestly, chapter 1 is like a tough lesson in better manage the damn scope or it'll bite you in the ass later. For
Those
real.
FTEs.
Yeah.
Those FTEs, bro. Oh my god.
Obviously, I don't regret anything about chapter 1. It was quite awesome. The fact that it took 2 years, however, we produced a lot of things. Like, think about it, right? Like 100k words, a lot of FTEs, new
There's a
minigames.
stupid amount of stuff in this chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's actually kind of impressive that it took 2 years only, but Yeah.
a majority of like the main core aspects of the game in its entirety, like for the next couple of chapters, has already been made, and you'll see a lot of that in chapter 1. Less scope, quicker development time. That's pretty much it. That's about as best I can hope for. On my side, I'm already gunning for like better code architecture for open source public stuff. But yeah, I think you guys said it best.
Last but not least, any final comments to new and old fans of the project alike?
We love you. We always will love you. We're gonna make something great for you guys, and we really hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, it's watching the trailer premiere yesterday and seeing all the comments coming through was like, yeah, like all I can say to that is like, I love all of you, like truly from the bottom of my heart. Like it's every single comment is just genuinely so meaningful.
Another thing as well is that if you make fan art, do all that things, oh my god, we love you so much. Like every time I see a new animation or anything that comes out of Peg, like, retweet, share, send it to the team. Mods, go take a look at it. Yeah, it's like shared all over to all my friends. It's all over. If you make fan content, we love you so much. Thank you so much. And like,
yeah, like we see it. We see it.
Exactly. Exactly. And like, every time you say things like, I hate Demon Maitsu. I love Wolfgang Akire. I ship Akiretsu, I think that's what it's called. And I ship Kaimon. We are like, yes, keep talking.
It's like I kind of consider I don't just kind of, I straight up consider our fan base a blessing because like in the past I've been the one to be like, oh, I love this character, or I ship this. So to see people saying that about like characters that my friends and I are making, like genuinely a blessing. When I was a little girl, like this was my dream to make video games and like have people enjoy characters that I help work on. And I'm so lucky. I am so lucky to be in this position, and I'm just so grateful for every single person that plays and enjoys like this game. Like, they're not just a number,
Absolutely.
Every single person is just, oh my god.
I know that in Project Eden's Garden, especially in the fanbase, there's a lot of mini creators. People who are aspiring to make fangans, correct? Honestly, like, what I have to say to them is just, even if your fan base is small, even if, everything seems to be just like a lot of work and whatnot, if you like it, that's what it matters, right? And, you can have 1 fan, 5 fans, 10 fans, 20k fans, how many, whatever, as many fans as you want, correct? But don't let that number stop you from doing what you love.
Yeah.
Because, like, if you rely on numbers to get your self-esteem, you have probably more problems to worry about than like making a fan.
Not to mention that even if it's one fan, that's a whole person.
Yeah.
It's a whole human being who is like, yeah, I like your stuff. Like, that's crazy. Just having a whole nother person just being like, yo, I love what you do. So you definitely don't let the numbers get you down, because you have to remember, these are like literally other people, possibly, from the other side of the world, who are a fan of you. Like what are the chances that something like that would happen? It's just, yeah, it's
creating anything, like whether it's, a game or just like a silly like drawing or like whatever else, like, if somebody likes something that you've done, then it's like you've successfully shared your heart with another person, and I think that's just that's really cool, and very
that's
surreal
the most
that we can
important
do that.
thing. Yeah, and I think that's the most important thing, because that's why we make this kind of art, so we can provide at least one person something to get invested in and to really enjoy and to sort of share tell a story to.
Also, I don't know if you can show this in the video. I just want to show this GIF in the video.
Yeah, let me.
That's all.
I think you can. Yeah, I mean,
I can
it's not
definitely do that.
spoilery.
Apple.
I really appreciate all the people who are like, because like so many people, like, you know, our fans in general are very understanding towards like our positions as volunteers. They're so understanding, and despite the 2-year gap between chapters, all these people are like, I'm back, I'm so excited, and that's really nice. That I want to say thank you to all those people who like kind of like understand that like we are humans too, and that we, you know, have to balance the creation of this game like among lots of other things, and the fact that they're so patient and they still get so hype when we release stuff is like, you know, it does mean a lot.
Yeah, I guess then that should be all for the questions. As always, thank you guys so much for talking to me about the game. I've really enjoyed.
Of course.
Of course.
Yeah.
Talking all the juicy details, and I look
No, I
forward
love these
greatly.
interviews. Oh, I know, I keep interrupting, I'm sorry, I'm just getting
You're
excited, but
totally fine.
I love these interviews. Like, I really appreciate you coming to interview us again. Because I was very excited for this, and I think you're in general, like, you're just a really great interviewer.
Oh, thank you. I was really looking forward to this too. Just like, you know, it's been a while since the prologue, but I was very happy to get contacted about it the first time, just because it's such a cool project, and I was really happy to get this again. Not only because it's like, you guys have really great answers and it's great talking to you, but also it's just like to get that little blip in my inbox, that little reminder that like, oh, you know, this is still happening and new stuff is coming out, and I'm like, I'm both excited from the end of like obviously getting to talk about the project, but also at the same time I'm excited as a person who enjoys the project itself and is like, hell yeah, new stuff.
Yes.
I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm greatly looking forward to December 20th, the launch date. I'm gonna be there. I mean, the holidays are so busy. I don't know if I'll be able to be there minute one, but you can bet the instant I have the opportunity to, I will be getting my hands on that chapter 1, no doubt about it. Maybe I'll even stream it. Who knows?
Well, I hope you enjoy it.
I'm sure
Yeah.
I will. Thank you so much, guys. I really, really enjoyed this
Thank you.
discussion.
No problem. We love you.
We love you. We love you. We love you. We love you.
Yeah.
All right. Well.
All right, ladies.
I guess I can end the recording.